I hereby call to order this regularly scheduled meeting of the Sunderland Selectboard and Finance Committees. Do we have quorum for Finance Committee? All right, so at this time I call to order the Sunderland Selectboard. Time is 6:31 p.m. Thank you. All righty. Our first order of business is to approve the minutes. Are we prepared to approve the minutes from 2 weeks ago? Wonderful. At this time, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the meeting on 2/10/2025.
I'm also going to approve minutes of Select Board and Finance from 2/10/2025.
Second?
All right, motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, 3-0. Thank you. Alrighty, our first order of new business will be to approve a new registrar, Alan Richards, per the town clerk recommendation. You want to tell us anything about that, or?
Wendy said this was needed to be done right away because of the work, the election work that she has to do in preparation for town meeting. So she asked that we reappoint the registrar. He's a longtime registrar. He's served over 10 years,
Yep.
and he's willing to be reappointed.
Great, thank you. Any questions from the board on that? All right, at this time, I would entertain a motion to appoint our current registrar, Alan Richards, for another year, per the town clerk recommendation.
Motion we reappoint Alan Richards as registrar per the town clerk's recommendation.
Second.
All right, we have motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 3-0. Thank you. All right, our other appointment today is to appoint a highway employee to the Insurance Advisory Committee.
I'm just realizing that George didn't tell me which highway employee.
Ah,
It's John, I believe it's John.
John Skibisky.
Yes,
Skibisky, yeah.
okay.
mentioned John.
All right.
Okay.
I motion we appoint John Skibisky from the Highway Department to the Insurance Advisory Committee.
Second?
All right, we have a motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, 3-0.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much. Alrighty, that gets sort of our mundane business out of the way. Let's talk budget. It is time for the money, the brass tacks, why we're here. So we're gonna start with reviewing the budget revenue changes from for year 25 to for year 26.
So this isn't in our folder anywhere to see it bigger,
There's a separate folder called budget.
but this copy is in there?
The
This version?
budget, actually, the one that's, I think they're both in, and one says expense, but the other is the revenue sheet that doesn't say either.
All right, this is really
It
hard
says
for
the
me.
budget recommendation,
No, I was just wondering if it was in the budget folder so I could see it bigger.
it's, it should be in March 10th. Okay, that's the expense one, and the one below should be.
Okay, and that's this copy.
This is the expense sheet, this is the revenue.
Okay. But they're the same as these last ones we got.
This might be a different, this was earlier. The total might be slightly different.
Yeah,
Great, it's the one I didn't copy.
okay.
There are a couple of small changes.
Yep.
Okay, so if we look over the revenue sheet first, and I apologize, did have a problem with the revenue sheet right before it was printed. The finance committee is,
So we can call
Still-
finance committee to order to give two.
because we received did she resign herself? Yes, about the,
Linda resigned.
yes,
So we have three of us, but there's two here, so we've called them.
okay.
So go ahead and call yourselves to order.
Call to order, finance committee
Wonderful.
at 6:35. Sorry I'm late.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Let me just make sure finance committee has the revenue sheet as well. Oh, I think Billy needed it, but you have, oh, you have. Okay. All right, so I just wanted to point out a few items on the revenue sheet. Okay, so this is an expanded version. I know Jeff had notes and he only gave you about 6 lines, 6 or 8 lines. The reason I'm using this version is to be sure there's no slippage from year to year, and make sure that we account for each piece of the revenue budget, if that's acceptable to the select board.
Yep, absolutely.
So when you start from the top of this budget, we're looking at the levy from last year. We bring forward the levy from last year in FY '25, which was $7,468,000. We add the 2.5 and then an estimate of new growth. This year, the estimate is very low. It's $50,000 because our prior year was $50,000. There have been years where it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. So there's a possibility that could change in the next year for FY '27. But it doesn't look likely for this year. So we've got a definition of our levy ceiling, which is at 14 million. The most important number on the sheet is the total valuation of the town is $585 million, 77,673 for this year. Last year, I'm carrying forward that valuation as an estimate. I believe it's going to increase next year. Last year it decreased. We had an issue with the appellate housing court that was settled that caused the drop, and we anticipate our valuations continuing to go up from that point. Next year, we do want to continue to do our cap stabilization. I'm estimating, and I will be, if currently it's a carry forward of the same amount from last year, $409,875. If the select board is so willing to approve a 2.5 increase on this amount, I will increase it in the estimate for the next review. It should add about $10,000 to our revenue pool, so that will help a little bit. Okay, so potentially next year when we do the recap, the tax levy that you will see should be $8,114,917, or a number close to that. After that, I went through the state cherry sheet. I added in the Chapter 90 money. The Chapter 70 money, and then went through and added in school choice funds that are incoming. For this year, they're $294,000. Upon review of we have the governor's budget. These numbers will be changing slightly in the next version of the revenue, and it's about a net $30,000 increase.
Okay.
With adding those numbers in.
Wonderful.
So that's a little bit that we're going to get there. We will see additional library money next year, potentially if the governor's budget holds, a few $1,000s there. And then there'll probably be a decrease, I think, in school choice, which will not be positive for the schools. They are currently getting $156,000 in school choices, and I believe that dropped a little bit. On our estimated receipts, what we find here is we have a healthy mechanism with our estimated receipts where we should bring in about $250,000 more than our estimates, and that will help replenish our free cash. And then our entries for our funds and our sewer reserve at the bottom. And if we do our capital stabilization correctly next year, we should have the benefit of that, that revenue to handle our capital needs for next year. Ending with $10,511,000 on the revenue side. Then if we go to the expense side, we find that our schools are the major driver in the increases, as you all observed at the last Finance Select Board joint meeting. There's been one significant change. The elementary school has reviewed their budget and tightened it up, dropping $59,000. So their increase for FY26 has dropped to about $4,000, I'm sorry, a 4% increase from a 5.6. So there are other requests in this budget. A number of them have been reviewed and tightened up their budgets. The town clerk and highway superintendent both have made fairly significant cuts. The highway department has cut back his request for $20,000 increase for equipment and materials. He was persuaded to do this because we have confirmation that his Chapter 90 money will be increasing from $180,000 to $300,000 per year. So anything he was going to purchase with that $20,000, he can purchase out of the new Chapter 90 funds. The town clerk has also tightened up her budget quite a bit. The telephone line is an area where we faced a huge increase with TPX. I've been told that by transitioning to Verizon, we are saving money over that increase, but our new total for all departments is $19,000, including the cell phones. There are 3 cell phone accounts that Town Hall pays for. Other cell phones are paid individually by department, but their main phone system will be paid for jointly by Mel, or the admin secretary to the select board. So we're just centralizing the billing and consolidating those departments. And I have reduced the individual expense accounts by the amount they had in their budgets, or that they spent last year. We got a report from the accountant and reduced those budgets by those amounts. It was about $8,000. So it's quite a significant increase, even by adjusting the cost. So Verizon is our new phone provider. There were a number of, well, you can all see in the select board area, there were a couple of increases. Technology is the biggest one, and the other was in the town audit.
And my understanding on the town audit one is because we're effectively paying for 2 years this year.
Yes.
Okay. But just for clarity, for anyone looking at this, this is not we expect it to continue to be that high, just for
Right,
the 1
it's
year.
a one-time cost and should not continue,
Okay.
will not continue. What is not in this budget are personnel changes, personnel increases. We have one open contract. Our police chief's contract is open. But I believe the school teachers union contract is not yet settled as well,
Yep, both the teachers and also the instructional assistant contracts, both of them.
the school contracts.
Yep.
We do have a new police department contract. There's a new union contract with the officers that is driving an increase to this budget for their department.
So the police department wages does include the increase, but none of the other,
Correct.
Well, the other ones include our best estimate of what those will be, right? The school budget,
The school
the
budget.
school committee already included the best estimate of what they think that their costs are going to go up to in
Their
theirs.
estimate of what they're gonna be.
So their budget's not going to increase beyond what they're telling us it's going to be because they give us that budget.
what about the personnel committee recommendations for all the town?
They are not in there.
Yeah.
Those are being presented tonight, and if approved by the select board, I will put them. We
So,
have the dollar amount, though, sorry.
so when we look at like police department, when he presented to us, he was asking for another full-time officer to help offset part-time police.
Yes.
Was that his expanded budget or was that his level service?
He just presented the one budget.
Okay, so what about like the library? Again, library was looking to add Thursdays into the mix. Is that what included in here
I
or?
believe it's in the $7,000 increase, because we hadn't added, she has a $7,000 increase under her
Support wages,
staff,
support wages.
and we have not yet added their increase. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's included
So-
in there.
So this budget is not the level services budget, this is the expanded budget in most of these categories.
Right, so I think we need to look and see what this is, and again, I'm not, if we look at those level service budgets, because a lot of people presented two, or they had a budget and then, an additional,
Yep,
we have to drop back to that level service one. Without
Okay.
the library having the extra day, without the police department having,
an extra officer. Well, he was reducing his part-time wages
Correct, but
dramatically, but it still was a $15,000 increase.
That's most of the difference between those two items is the contractual increases and whatnot. Yes, it's more expensive. We're not seeing the total amount coming off of the part-time wages for the full-time wages, but the new full-time officer is not that entire amount. It's less than that. So yes, it's not a one-to-one trade between part-time hours and full-time hours.
Yeah.
But as he had presented to us, one of the problems they're having is they can't get part-time officers.
no, I
you know.
understand that, but we need to, we've got
Oh,
to
no, I don't disagree.
come with a way to start trying to close this
I
gap.
just mean that if we tell him no full-time officer, it's not gonna just immediately take that whole big increase and put it back over in part-time. We're gonna get we're gonna take 50-something off of the full-time, but we're gonna still get the 37 back on the part-time wages.
Correct.
And also be in a position.
Right,
where we're not
but we
sure
need to actually see what that real number
Yeah.
difference is.
Yes,
Because there's some of it we can't do anything about because they have a contract with a pay increase, which is wonderful. I'm glad they have it.
yep,
But, there's a difference between those two line numbers being $30,000 and those two line numbers being $3,000.
yes.
And I believe he said the full-time officer is $52,000.
Yeah,
Yep.
And so.
right, 38 and the part-time, so, right. So we might not, it might still go that way, but,
And I believe he said if he can't get another full-time officer with a reduction in his part-timers, he's likely not going to be able to provide 24/7 service.
Is
but,
that 24/7 with two people on, or is it 24/7 period? I think it might have been with two people on.
No period.
Period. So I don't think they have 24/7 now.
He said they do.
They
have
aim
an
for
overnight.
24/7.
Yes, I know they
but then,
aim
But
for
then
it.
when if they have an open shift they can't fill and they don't have a
Right.
part-time officer to fill it, they leave it unfilled and then they basically call the state troopers and
Right.
say, by the way, you might get some phone calls from because we have nobody in
Right.
town. Which I mean, to be honest, that is a discussion we could have about whether or not we as a town are demanding 24/7 police service or whether we are okay with there being more gaps. If we're okay with there being more gaps, that's a decision, but that's a decision that the town should be making eyes open, is that if you call the police at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Thursday, you may not actually get somebody in Sunderland. There may be an officer being sent from Bernardston. So, it's a,
Right, I'd just like to see what that difference
Oh, yes.
is for the wage.
no, I agree with that.
versus-
Did Eric give us a budget? He didn't give us a budget without that, right? He just gave us the one budget with,
He only gave
Okay.
the one budget.
if we could get numbers on that for next time to know what it would be like if we said no to that.
Well, he doesn't get to say no, we get to say no.
Well, he-
I'm saying, like, if we say no to him, I would like to know what those numbers look like. Because again, if it's like 52 comes down, but then his part-time goes up by 45, because it's not just the putting back in the part he took out, it's also the normal increases he needs. I'd like to know what the difference between those two is before we
Okay.
make any kind of decision on that.
Same thing with the library one, taking out the,
That's just the $7,000, right?
Right.
So that one we had voted.
Yeah.
And the highway superintendent talked about adding a fourth person, but he's holding out to next year because he knew it was a tight budget year.
Yeah, which we appreciate.
And I believe he asked for it last year too.
yeah, he has been for,
I got a question on the revenue one, maybe you can help
Yeah.
me with. On the total estimated receipts, it says local source totals about 3/4 of the way down. And I see fiscal year '23 actuals, fiscal '24 actuals, and then I see current year and proposed FY '26 about 200 and something thousand dollars less. You see where I'm looking? See the 943, 410, local source totals, this is down below the total estimated
sorry,
receipts.
I'm-
Right there.
I'm close
Yeah.
enough.
Right there, see that number? And then that number.
943,
And then
940.
it goes down 200 and something thousand. Why is that?
Because those are actuals.
So those mean potentially the revenues could go up 250,000?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so this is what Sunderland does.
Yeah.
And DOR is very clear on your practice,
Yeah.
this practice, is the town lowballs their local receipts to generate free cash.
Generate, okay.
So you have two options. Either you could put what you really think it's gonna be, which is 250,000 more. And so, instead of 739,000, if you put in the 981,
Well,
you
something,
could,
yeah.
you could balance your budget with that additional money. But you can't change your practice back and forth willy-nilly.
Yeah.
So DOR watches this, and
Sure.
if you do it this way, they're really, like, to change it is an issue.
Okay.
You gotta really
Okay.
talk to them and do it over time. So
Okay.
this is why you count, the town counts on using free cash every year. This is
And-
where it's coming from.
And it's one of those things where like we could shift our practices, but where we gain money on this side, we're gonna
Yeah.
end up with less free cash the following year, and it's all the
And
same.
next year
It's
we
just,
don't have free cash.
Right.
and the concern is that if you estimate as closely as you think, and then receipts come in lower than you think they are, that's a lot worse than ending up with extra free cash at the end of the year
Okay.
because you were lowballing.
Okay, so it's just something we know that's
Yeah.
documented. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
That was actually a question I asked Jeff my first year also.
Ask a revenue question. So this is at 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
This is a little bit different. Which one is the updated one? Or is-
That's the better one.
Okay, all right, but this is, let's stay on this one. So the question I have is my first cycle through this. So when I look at revenues are increasing by about 280,000. That's the bottom right, change from one year to the next, right? And then I look at expenses, those are increasing year over year about 440,000, right? So you've got a deficit obviously in that year, but the structural deficit or the gap to close is much bigger than that. So is there any history you or the select board could share on like what beyond the free cash usage drove that structural deficit? You know, what other things were at play here other than just the year-over-year revenue expense numbers?
So free cash is a big part of that. Is that we're going to be, the last bunch of years, we've used some number of hundreds of thousands of dollars in the budget from free cash. And I believe that's the majority of what you're seeing. And we will, again, most likely this year, use a chunk of free cash to balance it.
Have we been using kind of the same amount of free cash every year for a number of years, or has it been growing?
So,
Yeah,
and that's
the numbers
partially,
down here on the,
yeah, and that's partially
Revenue sheet.
what Becky was talking about is we estimate low, we end up with extra free cash, and then that feeds into the next budget, and then we estimate low, and
I
so.
understand that's where it's coming from, but I'm kind of asking about the size of the hole and how that's changed over time.
It's been fairly consistent. I think I don't remember the exact number, but we've been putting roughly the same amount into from
Well,
free
I
cash
mean-
in every year.
About 250.
You
But
have
there
those in
was
there.
one year. it was
it's right there, free cash
600.
used.
I'm not sure.
to balance
I think
budget.
that was,
Yeah, so,
I
so
think it
the,
was because the cap stabilization wasn't done correctly
Yeah.
that year, and they had
Okay.
cash.
I mean, it's good that we're funding capital projects a year ahead through stabilization, and that we're using free cash a year ahead versus current year by increasing revenues. So those are two areas where there is some conservatism built in, but the growth of the deficit is certainly a concern.
Yeah, oh, yeah. And that was my biggest concern.
Yeah, I
Coming
mean,
here.
again, expenses going up 4%, revenues going up 3%. Do we have a revenue problem, an expense problem, or both?
yes. We actually have about 7 problems in a trench coat this year.
All right.
Becky mentioned briefly that we had some litigation in the appellate courts for housing that ended up causing us to have our valuation go down, so that brings down the revenue side a chunk. We also, as has been mentioned a couple of times, had an issue with the capital stabilization override this year and a half ago, so we didn't collect $400,000 that we were supposed to, so that's another revenue side issue. And then in addition to that, we have our Frontier 5-year rolling thing, as we heard 2 weeks ago. Our numbers went up, all other towns went down, and so we're seeing a huge, pull on that side. So it's bad year for revenue for a number of reasons, all kind of minor things, but when you add them all together, it adds up. And then a bad year for the budget side, also for the expenses side, also for a number of reasons. Each one of which just makes that gap get bigger between the two of them.
I mean, some of the
Yeah.
persistent challenges, in some of the budgets we've seen so far, especially around health insurance, retirement, like year over year, those are unsustainable increases. And, the frontier number of students that can roll up and roll down,
Absolutely,
over
yeah.
time, but the other ones don't seem to be, those are kind of one of my.
That doesn't be wrong.
Yeah, it's a lot of this stuff has fluctuations like a stock market does, and we just had a year where all those fluctuations all compounded in a bad direction. We've had years where, and not in recent memory, but we've had years where we got lucky in a lot of ways, and we ended up having a very robust year, and we were able to make big changes to town and have, and also put money in stabilization and also put money into these different funds. And I'm glad we did those things, because now we're in a year where we're looking at the stabilization fund as a driver. And from a free cash perspective, and to be clear, this is only my 3rd year doing this, but from the last 2 years in a free cash perspective, we don't look at it so much as how much of the free cash, how much dollar amount are we putting into the budget, more of a trying to balance the percentage of free cash into these different pockets. So if 1 year our free cash is 500, what we put into the budget, what we put into stabilization, what we leave for next year is going to be smaller than a year where our free cash was $800,000. And so some of the fluctuation we see on the money we're putting in there is because that year our free cash was much higher. In fact, I think it was either last year or the year before, we had a really substantial chunk of free cash, like $800,000 something dollars. And so we tried very hard to squirrel away as much as that we could into the stabilization funds, which again, I'm really glad we did, because we're in a position now where these hits coming this year, we at least have that buffer. But then also those years we chose to put more money into the operating budget as well.
Can I ask one more clarifying question? This line I'm not familiar with, only partway down on the revenue, let's see, less excess levy capacity. I thought I knew what that was, but I see it bouncing around a lot, and so that makes me wonder if I understand it. I wouldn't have expected it to shift so much year to year. It goes from
Yeah.
400,000 to 1,000 to 400,000. Am I missing something about the timing?
I'm learning more about this. What's
Okay.
making this bounce is the capital stabilization
Okay,
mechanism. So we ended up, so what happened this year is we ended up going to town meeting, getting approval to raise the revenue, but we did not execute it on the recap correctly.
okay.
So we are now spending the revenue. I'm sorry. We are now expending the amount, the 409,000. Those projects were almost completed when we discovered we didn't have the money to pay for them. So we will be going to a special town meeting, I hope, I believe approved by the select board for FY '25 ahead of the annual town meeting, the same morning, and we'll have to transfer 409,000 to this FY '25 budget to balance it, to pay for this.
From where? No, it's-
From stabilization funds. We have 600,000 in stabilization funds. And we will be moving 2/3 of it to correct this problem.
Yep.
So we passed the capital stabilization, but then it didn't find its way through to the tax bills, so we didn't actually collect it?
Correct.
Correct.
It was not included in the tax bill, and we discovered it about 3 days after the tax bills went out. But we couldn't do anything about it.
I have a nickel and dime question. So,
Could I finish the answer?
yeah,
So,
I'm sorry.
we had 392,000 of excess levy capacity because that override wasn't happening. If that override was happening, that excess levy capacity would have disappeared, and we would have had to use the balance, like the 15,000 from our local receipts, raise one to get 15,000, because you can't have less than 0 levy capacity.
Right.
But it is odd behavior. I haven't seen that before either. Does that answer your question?
I'm starting to get that. My thought would be how to go from 400 to 1,000 in 2 years prior, but we don't do that today.
So you mentioned in the highway department that they were able to lower their level services budget or drop it by 20,000
Yes.
because they're getting this other money.
Yeah.
Can they drop, is there anything else they can drop? Because what you told me they were getting was more than they expected and was much larger. They were gonna be down 20, but like up 80 or something.
Yeah, they're going up 120.
So, but I don't know, I mean, wages maybe they can't do, but I wonder if like this highway snow ice expenses a line
You
that
can't,
else.
it's chapter 90, you can only use on certain things.
And,
But,
and you can't touch your snow.
and the
ice.
road machinery can't be one of those things? Because it still has 20,000 for road machinery, that could be used for that, right? I mean, that's $20,000,
I will talk to him some more.
right? I mean,
Yeah,
we're talking, you
Yeah.
know, we're gonna lay off a police officer and not have, you know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
Yep.
if he has other monies to get it.
yeah.
So that 21, so most of the things can't be used, but that 21 could be.
I think so.
So it was 40-something and now it's 20-something and he could go another 21.
Potentially, but it would.
Or we can
depend-
tell him to. And not that it's his, you know. It's nicer to work congenial.
Yeah.
He will definitely know more than we will about what can and can't be used with that money.
Okay.
And
His biggest concern is the salary of his 2 employees, because everyone around him is cherry picking.
Right, so he might be able to say, I'll cut the
Equipment
21,000 off my road machinery because I have this other thing I can use for it, as long as I get the salary bump for my workers. I feel like that's a deal we could make,
yeah,
because that person not gonna be recommended it anyway.
Yeah.
Right, I mean, that's,
yeah. No, I mean that's for where we're
I can't
at
remember
is
what that
is
bump
is
was
going
for
through
the
these budgets
workers,
to find a couple bucks here and there.
3,000 total. That's right.
yeah, I feel like we can say, you know,
Yeah, it's 2,080.
yeah,
For
piece.
each.
So, yeah, so you give us 21,000, we give you 4,000, that sounds like a good deal.
Do it 15 or 20 more times and we'll be all set.
Yeah.
I'm just, you know,
No.
if
No, I
that's
like
what's, if he has, you know, if
Yeah.
that's a source of money that can be used for that, we're
And
at
it's-
20, if it can't be used for anything else, great, but if it can be used for the road machine, then,
And we're not asking to claw back the entire amount that he's getting. He's still getting, if we're taking 40 back from him, he's still getting 80,000 more overall than
Right.
he would be
right.
the previous year.
And his workers are getting a raise.
And his workers are getting the
And he's
raise.
getting a raise.
And so, no, I like that thinking. Remind us how much free cash we have this year? We got that certified already, right?
600.
600, okay.
126,000, I think.
And what are the available different stabilization funds amounts roughly?
About 600 also for 575 I'm sorry, 575 for regular stabilization and capital stabilization.
So the capital stabilization has about 2 in it because we were supposed to put 409 in that didn't go in. We budgeted 409, intentionally leaving the 200 there because we're trying to build up money for a new roof for elementary school. And so we do have 200 in that account. And so one of the things that we're going to be discussing between now and special town meeting, and particularly at special town meeting, is do we put a 400 in there to get back to where that account should be, leaving the 200,000 for the future? Because, I mean, the reality is, in a couple of years, we're gonna need a roof for the school, and it's gonna be $1 million, or something close to that. And so, do we say, take the L on this and have the account go back down to 0 and only put 209 and whatever in order to get it to 0, or do we put the full 400 in, get us to where we should be? That is sort of part of our question. Or do we, or in the middle, do we say, okay, we'll put 300 in and, cut the.
Was the plan to build 100 or so a year to get to $1 million some number of years from now? Or?
So what we, for context, the capital stabilization had originally been 125 or something like that. We went to town meeting 2 years ago to ask for that increase to bring that up to $400,000. And that $400,000 number came out of a 10-year plan that the capital stabilization committee looked at of all the projects in town. It was about $4 million over 10 years. So we said $400,000, and that included the roof. And so any given year, the requests might be 100,000 or 600,000, or it might be a year where they ask for $1 million roof. What we're trying to do is underspend for the next couple of years so that by the time the roof hits us, we've got 600 in there, we got the 400 coming in this year, it's $1 million roof, we can actually do it, not borrow if we can avoid it.
And so the couple of years since we started this, are we checking, are the projects that are being approved each year part of that original 10-year plan, that new projects aren't falling in because then you'll end up?
So, and that's part of where we were on the 10-year plan is that we made it clear to town, like, this is us just meeting the needs that we know about.
Right.
And we actually, Peter can, we hem and hawed over whether to ask for more. Should we say 6? Should we say that really the number we should be aiming for is 6? Because what we're probably gonna see is $6 million over the next 10 years versus 4. And what we decided was, it was better to ask for something that the town was gonna be able to say yes to than, and still be kind of short, honestly, over the next 10 years, than ask for something that was gonna get shot down and we were gonna end up being at 0 rather than at 400. So the short answer is,
Because that was an override.
that was an override that we had to get passed for the town. The short answer is, hopefully every year we're putting 100 or 2 away for the roof. This obviously is a huge hand grenade thrown in that, because we not only are we potentially losing the buffer we had, but we're also having to dip into our other reserves to pay off the chunk we're missing.
Well, that,
Yeah.
every debt budget, the first thing that gets cut is CapEx, so that's, towns are no different than anybody else there.
Yep.
Luckily, there was very little requested this year.
Was there good data around sizing that 4 million? Like, does the state share, like, for towns of this size or town budgets of this size, this is how much you should be thinking about as a percent of your population, or percent of your budget, or percent of your something? Like, do we have good data to try to, like, level set? Is 4 low? Do we think it's low? Is it definitely low based on data? How do we do that?
So I'd like to start by saying I'd love to see you join the capital stabilization subcommittee, because we'd love to have the questions be asked. As far as I know, either that information is not available to us or we haven't availed ourselves of it. we're largely looking at historical data, and also part of our problem is that a lot of the items that were asked for, like we'll find out in 2020 that we need a new fire truck or something like that, and by the time we actually put it into effect in 2024, it's half again as more expensive than it was when we started calculating. So, and that was one of the other things that we said to the town is that all of these prices are in 2023 prices. We have no idea, or we do have an idea, and it's a bad idea of what's going to happen to these prices over the length of this estimation. So really, it was a shot in the dark, but 400 is a hell of a lot better place than 125 was, and at the very least, we should be able to handle the projects that are on our plate currently. And to be fair, of that $4 million, some of it was stuff that could be pushed out of the 10-year window. Some of it is stuff that maybe we even just outright say no to the departments asking because it's just not reasonable, but not as much enough of it to make a huge difference. At least $3.5 million of that is stuff that just we don't have a choice about. It has to be done.
Yeah, I mean,
in the next 40
you need a
days.
roof, you need a roof. You
Yeah.
can't push that
Exactly.
out indefinitely.
The roof on the elementary school is already past its effective lifespan. And that's not to even speak about the Frontier roof, which is also at its lifespan as well, which is a whole other ball of wax. But
It's past its lifespan? Sunderland Elementary?
I believe last year we passed, it was a 25-year roof, and we're at 26, aren't we?
2000, yeah, 2002.
2002 was when it was covered.
Yeah, so
Wow.
it's- time flies.
So,
And my daughter was born in 2001, she's 23, so.
So, okay, so,
22 years.
okay, so,
Dude,
but still,
20 life, yeah.
I retract my statement. Not quite,
Well,
not
no,
quite at the
no,
end of
I
life,
just-
but
You
Well,
kinda
close.
lose,
fiscally, we should have.
Yeah.
yeah, but no, you kind of just lose track of time. I keep thinking, it's not even 20 years ago,
Yes,
but
it is.
it is.
I believe I was in elementary school when that was going in, so, you know, just to make you old.
Yeah, my kids were in elementary school when it happened too, but.
So did that answer your questions about
No,
those
that's
parts?
great, and thanks for, engaging on that, because I know we do a lot of work outside of Selectboard and the capital committee, and capital planning is one of the hardest parts of any budget planning, to be honest.
And really, like, I cannot sing the praises of the people in town on boards and the members of town to have the foresight to pass that override the first time, and then the original 100, which turned to 125, plus the additional, because this process would be that much harder if we were having to say, and also we have $400,000 worth of capital expenses that we don't have a mechanism to pay for that has to go into the operating budget. We'd be $400,000 more in the hole right now. So really glad.
And that's what makes it tricky talking about using some of that saved up money, because that's not what that was originally intended for.
Right.
Yes. Which is again why I really would like to, if we can, put the full 400 in there, because that's what the town voted on. That's what the town said, no, this is what we expect to be there.
But we didn't get the
but we didn't-
400,000.
Yeah, but we didn't actually click. And the reality is, everybody in town got a tax break this last year. Like, it's
Yeah.
lovely for everyone's pockets, everyone got
We
to
passed
walk
that
away.
at a town meeting.
Yeah, and that's sort of,
This is how much you saved.
I'm hoping we don't have to go to real convincing of people in order to make this right, but that's the argument we make, is like, the bottom line is that you guys agreed last year to be charged this much. You weren't. We're not coming after you for you now, because we can't, but we're asking you to help us make it right by agreeing that, like, yes, some money's gonna have to move around and that kind of thing.
But it's also that you're asking for a transfer of funds that still won't cost them for this year.
Yeah,
So they're getting a year off from the capital expense.
and
And then we
really,
get the estimate on the roof, and it's more, we have to do another capital override.
Possibly.
Although because
Well,
this
we can go
year,
up 2.5, you can go up 2.5 every year. So I think it was 2016 that the $100,000 override began. They started talking about it in 2014, but it hit the books in 2016, and then it was
23, I think.
2022. 2022, they passed a $250,000 override.
275, yeah.
275, thank you. So that was 275, and that worked well in 2024.
Yeah. And really, in the end of the day, what's gonna end up happening is the hit is gonna be felt most in the general stabilization fund. If this didn't all happen, if we collected the money appropriately, most of our other conversations are going the same way as they did right now. The main one is going to be whether it's 200, 300, or 400, some chunk of money is going to end up having to be transferred out of our stabilization fund into this. I don't love that long term. I like having $600,000 in that. You know, there's a reason it's there. The other side of it is, this is one of the reasons it's there. Is it if there's a mistake in town, something happens, we're $400,000 unexpectedly short. That's why you have stabilization funds, is to stabilize crazy situations.
Right, but at minimum, we've got to do the 125 because
Get
that
to
was,
zero. Yeah, you gotta get to zero.
because that 125 should have been there before the override.
Yeah, I mean, we have to put at least 209,000 or something along those lines, just to be at zero in terms of balancing the books for the year. We can't leave that account negative $200,000 at the end of the year. That's why we have to go to the special town meeting. The question again is whether or not it's all of it or half or three quarters or.
Well, that's where I guess the argument around just doing the 209 is, as it worked out, the town didn't in fact approve 400 to go in and start building this. That will happen the following year. So it's really, we're using free cash, and do we want to use free cash to jumpstart that balance to 200? And so maybe that's where.
And it's honestly, it's
zero.
it's a little bit more complicated because the town did approve the money,
Well,
and that's the thing. Is that like we didn't.
And spent.
Yeah, it's already been spent.
But it wasn't raised.
It wasn't raised. Yeah.
So,
Turns out the last thing you do
But it
is.
counts as our baseline for our taxes, so the next year, we can go from there.
Yes.
Yes.
So it's a dip, but we're you know.
and so it makes sense to use it on capital projects. It's less clear, although you can still do it, to create the $200,000 positive balance to start building. I guess that's my point.
I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
From where I'm coming from, the town has approved there should be $600,000 for capital, with 400 we're spending to 200 we're saving. That's what the town approved. So we can either make right what the town approved, or we can kind of claw back half of that
Right.
and say, no, we're only going to put in the much to get you to
Because we
zero.
don't have it.
Because we don't have it. And again, that may be the answer,
Right.
you know?
Again, when you want to start playing with the numbers, it's really 275, because that would have been what we should have additionally collected.
Or the whole 400.
But no, I mean, yes, but it's two chunks, but both of the chunks weren't collected. Both of the chunks should have been on there. Both of the chunks were approved. And so,
Right, but the 125 that have been going in since 2016 should still be going in.
I mean, yes, but it didn't. And the 225 also should have been
Well,
going
no,
in.
that should have went in because,
No, none of it was put in to section 10-2, where it, under other, it was
So we didn't
left
even
off.
collect the regular that we could have.
We didn't collect the 125, we didn't collect the 275, we didn't collect the 2.5%
Yes, they're
increase for the
both
last 2
handled
years, any of
together.
it.
Okay.
Bummer.
Yes.
Well, it really was a tax break. It wasn't just a missed
Oh, no.
tax increase. It was a literal
Tax
reduction.
break.
And $400,000 on a tax roll like ours is a substantial tax break.
Yeah.
Like, substantial chunk of money. So, and, you know, again, great for the people of Sunderland, you know, congratulations, you got a tax break this year. But the reality is that there might be some longer term consequences of that happening, that we're trying our best to both mitigate and plan for and figure out how to shift, you know, pay Peter out of Paul's pocket and that kind of thing.
So it seems like the first thing we need to do is go back to the, you know, make sure all of these budgets are the level service budgets, not the bigger one. That's the starting. And then we discuss them one by one, saying, if we have any wiggle room, this is the 3 things we want, not level services, but we start with everybody with the level services, right?
So, and on that note, I of course want to give everyone everything. If I had to pick one item that I would like to see happen this year, it's actually the library increase. They've been asking for that forever. They don't ask for big increases ever. And it's not just oh yeah, we're going to provide a little more something. It's going from a 4-day to a 5-day a week
Yeah,
offering.
there's a tricky
and-
thing with that thing with the library too. So they got approved for a grant that would pay for the position for 1 year. So ironically, if we put it in the budget this year, there's revenue to balance it, but we don't, the library is pretty uncomfortable with increasing the budget 1 year and then closing the library again the next year.
Yeah.
So
It
they
would
don't
be a
wanna
commitment that we would
take
be
the
making.
$10,000 grant and open the library on Thursdays and then close it again the next year because they, you know, so they'd rather have it be funded through the town we don't like the grant to be paying
No,
for the
and-
hours that
So-
our workers are working.
I think that though becomes,
I'm just giving
No,
you
but I'm
information that-
thinking
I'm not
may-
sure that's the right decision, but that's what this.
but maybe it is a good thing because it lets you to take the grant and do it for a year. It lets you see what the interest is. It lets you see, are you really getting
Right.
more
Yeah.
coming into the library versus are we just still have the same activity at the library? It's just spread out over more days.
The library trustees haven't talked about it yet because we just found out we got
Yeah.
a grant in between meetings, so we don't talk about it till.
I mean,
That is an interesting idea.
well, and something, of course, the town can never make any kind of promises to certain
Yeah.
levels, but
Yeah,
I
none
would,
of
I
our,
would
we
be,
maybe
I,
we have to close the library on Tuesdays from now, and we don't
yeah,
know.
but I would be much, I would be very happy, I'd be a lot happier than I normally am to have the town pick up the tab off of a grant, knowing these are the circumstances they're under. We already want to do that for them, knowing that they're taking a year grant. I'd be much happier next year being like, yes, we'll take that $7,000 on now the grant's not there, especially because, and next year hopefully won't be this perfect storm year where all of our budget stuff is falling apart in the same way.
Right, but I
So,
think,
But we have to be careful because the senior center, right, also had a grant funded
Grant
position.
last year.
And then we're like, we're not, why should we keep funding, like, maybe
Yeah.
we can't keep funding that. So it's just,
Right.
it's complicated.
right, but I think there's some benefit in funding that position or that additional day because it will actually give you real data. Does this increase our energy costs? Does this increase our cleaning costs? Does this increase our snow removal cost? All these things that, right now, you're one less day in that library. You add that day and you can see everything that it increases versus,
It's tricky though. You're right, it will gather that data, but the problem is, or the challenge is that if we come back in a year and they're like, hey, this is good for some number of people, whatever the data
Yeah.
is. That's great, and if that number is greater than 0, we've helped somebody, but that can't be the threshold to determine budget allocation because everything we're trying to do helps people, right? The litmus test can't be, does it help some people in the community? Like, it should be, does that help the community more than solving the part-time, full-time police officer dilemma, for example?
Yeah.
Right? Both of those things help the community, so it can't just be, is it good? It's gotta be, is it better than the other thing that we can't do if we do this?
well, and it's also a bang for your buck kind of a situation as well, which is partially why I'm actually pushing for this, is because getting another, that's, you know, what, 50 days a year additional for $7,000 in the library seems really cheap to me. Seems like we're getting a bargain on that. And maybe a part of it's what you're saying, which is that there's hidden costs in there that we won't really know until we've spent a year with an extra day. But if you came to me and said that for $7,000 we could open the library for 50 more days of the year, that seems like a really good bargain per day.
it does, so that's exactly it. It seems like a really good bargain.
Oh, and so, and part of that is the hidden cost, but also part of it is that we're still heating the library on Thursdays, whether there's people in there or not. We can't just turn the heat off on Thursdays in the middle of the winter, the pipes would freeze. So we're already heating the building. Yes, maybe not as many lights are on, but there's still a bunch of electricity usage. We're still paying for the lawn to be mowed as many times, whether we're using it 4 days or 5 days. We're still paying for the snow removal when there's snowstorms. It's not like we don't remove it because, you know, if it's not Thursday, it's going to be removed for Monday. So, you know, I would also like to see that information, but I feel like in many ways we're getting more out of the facilities that we're already paying for if we're using it for all the days of the week as opposed to only partial days of the week. So anyway, but yes, I would love to see data on that. So maybe that is something we ask the library to do, is to use that grant to give us a year's worth of data so we have some data for next year. You know?
You know, the library, like I said, hasn't had the conversation yet, so,
Yeah.
but you know, the concern is that if we open up on Thursdays and then the next year we're closed, there's like a learning curve and people you hear more squeaky wheels when you take something away than when you add it, right?
Yeah.
So it's tough, like when the town hall closed on Fridays, it was a nightmare, and now people are used to it. But that's a lot, like it's a lot on the staff, it's a lot on people coming on Thursdays, what do you mean you're not open, banging on the door, you know.
But sort of, in terms of the
People get used to
yes, well,
things.
in terms of the effect of that, that's kind of what we're saying though. Is that if it's wow, this is going to be a huge decrease to the town if we take it away. There's like lots of people who are interested in it. then yes, the town will take that data and next year choose to fund it because that's a valuable thing.
I think
If
we
it's,
should try it. I'm just saying that
Yeah.
the concern is, you know, it's like, here's a lollipop, you get to have it this year, the next year you don't get a lollipop.
yeah. No,
You got diabetes now.
and again, I can't speak for the board next year, nor can I speak for our budget situation, but my goal is to have this be a change that we make permanently. They've been asking for a bunch of years. I think it's the right choice for the town to be open more days of the week for library. It's a great resource. It gets used a lot. You
Just
know.
so you know, the hours that they want to open on Thursday are those special hours, the autism hours.
Yeah.
And that's the grant.
And that's honestly, I haven't even mentioned that, but that's another piece of why I think it's a great idea, because those are services that are sorely lacking in the valley, in
It's
our
just, it's
Sunderland.
not closed to everyone else, it's just, it's the only day a week that the library is really quiet. It's like old school, shh, instead
Yep.
of community center.
But also, because of the nature of what they're trying to do, they're not going to try to fill that day full of events and stuff like that.
Right.
Which will also, hopefully, if we did find ourselves in a position where next year we were having to say no,
Then
would
we
mean that
haven't
at the
lost
very
it.
least, there isn't 1,000 things planned that day. It's a loss, especially for the autistic people in town, for sure. But again, that's a hard conversation for
I
next year.
think
You
you also
know?
have the library trustees.
And full disclosure, I have 2 kids who spend a lot of time in that library, so I am also slightly biased in that direction. I love our library, and I want to see it open as much as possible. All right, are there any other specific line items that the finance committee want to go over? I know you have lots of information in front of you, and we'll need time to do
I don't know
this.
if there's any, this would just be a general conversation, be nothing we can do right now, but, you know, one of the big, there's a few big line items, and we don't control a lot of them. Frontier, Sunderland, you know, the employee medical and life is, I know we touched on, you know, I think Maya versus the other group, like, are there any even bigger things we can think about doing, or how we can change this, even if it doesn't change next year, but just to try to keep this from continuing to happen? I don't have any answers. I'm
Yeah,
just-
so Becky has been looking at ways to reduce that 19.9% increase on the health insurance by possibly making some changes to the plan, like a copay or that kind of thing. All of that, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it for it, needs to go through the bargaining units in town because they need to agree to make those changes. That being said, they also pay a part of their insurance premiums, and so they also, I would assume, would have an interest in finding ways to bring that dollar amount down, because
Do
it
you know what
hurts.
the percentage is that employee pays versus employer?
Most employees pay 35%, and the
Yeah.
town pays 65. Retirees are now paying 30, and the town is paying 70. The Insurance Advisory Committee had recommended over time to increase the town's portion 2.5% a year, to get to, I don't know what the end goal, maybe 75?
Yeah, I think the end goal is 75.
I mean, because at Frontier, and it's 70, it was to get to that percentage.
The
So, you know, we have,
Frontier, yeah.
you know, Frontier, the teachers have a higher percentage than SES and in the town. So it was to try to, it was kind of.
Yeah, so we want, you know, if we were able, we wanted to be able to increase the percentage the town paid and,
But now
you
that
know,
it's going up and then.
but
I'd be interested to see the data of like what a lot of the towns have as a percentage, like data, Deerfield's a good data point, I'd be interested to see what.
so
They're at
there is,
7%.
there is a spreadsheet out there that says what all the other towns pay for
Because I think
percentages.
Frontier is based on-
But unfortunately, when we started looking a lot further into it, you couldn't really call it the same, because Sunderland, for example, has a plan with, say, super minimal co-payments, but then you might look at someone else's plan and they've got a deductible and co-payments. So
Okay.
they were really tough to start comparing.
But we are hopefully meeting next week. I've been trying to get this group together for the last 2 weeks, but hopefully we'll be meeting on Monday and Wednesday if we have to wrap it up. We've got a list of potential plan design changes we can make that might, add up to about 9.3.
What is that group? Is that a committee or is that a?
Yes, it's the Insurance Advisory Committee. It's made up of
Oh,
employees.
is that the one we just? okay,
Yeah.
Yes.
or you just-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the highway superintendent didn't want to continue on that committee, and he was the one who was
Yeah.
on it.
It had no fun?
Yes, he was having plenty
Yeah,
of fun.
it's a tough comparison because every health insurance plan is different. You know,
I
depending.
do this in my job on the nonprofit side of schools, so, yeah.
Oh, you can help us.
I say too much.
So I'm looking, I'm nickel and diming here, trying to figure out what we can do. I don't think we talked to anyone, but the maintenance on the town rec fields doubled.
That's
So-
a necessity.
Yeah,
And
you
the
want,
reason, I'm sorry.
you mind if I speak to that one quickly? So the short answer is that prior to this year, we've had a robust or a declining but still existent, committee of folks in town who run the baseball program. And so a lot of the maintenance was being done by that program. That program has since become defunct and no longer has members of town running it. And so the responsibility of that maintenance that was originally being done by that group is falling to the town now, and thus to Jim Ewing, his department. So the work we're asking him to do is going up substantially.
You'll see an increase in Jim adding 5 hours, I think, 4 hours to his schedule in pay. He was, the original numbers at 14,000 there, he puts in like 30, 40 hours a week. He's getting paid for 15 or 16 and getting $15 an hour. So I'm trying to
And
get that
and
up
another
to
another piece
19
of context
hours.
for that also is that we had done a substantial cut in that around COVID because the town acknowledged that, well, we're not running all of these rec programs during
Yeah, I
COVID.
see.
And so he was at this level, we dropped him down, and we're looking at getting him back up to sort of pre-COVID levels because he's back to doing pre-COVID levels worth of work, just not getting compensated for that. And as far as I'm concerned, that's not right. He's a great
We just
guy, he
had
does a lot
talked
of
about that
things.
in meetings, so I just-
No, that's a very valid question.
Yeah.
So.
Good explanation. The South County Senior Center, we don't have a choice, right?
So,
We're one out of 3 towns.
Right. And so if everyone else approves it, we don't have a choice.
I have some questions about how that all works myself, to be honest.
But there's, it's a long-term challenge, but it's not anything we can do for this budget.
Well, you could still pass whatever budget you pass, and then if you're overridden by the other 2 towns, then so be it, but
Is that how that works?
They vote for it, we have to go along with it, they vote for it.
Or we can pull ourselves out of the South County Senior
Right.
Center
But
ball, and
could
that's,
we vote a
yeah.
lower budget, see what the other towns do, and then have to go back up to the,
I mean, do we even know what the other towns have done? Wait,
Yes. I mean, the other towns are all passing that budget.
for South County?
Yeah,
for the senior center?
I believe.
So, I mean, I guess one of the questions is, are they happy about doing so? And should there maybe be a conversation amongst those 3 towns about that? And then either we all agree that, yep, this is what it is, or as a united front, we go back and say, no, you need to cut some money out of it.
Because that was a 20% increase, and,
That was a grant, right, from last year.
Yeah.
well, they wanted,
Well, and-
we had to, because they had a grant, and now they don't have the grant. to
Right.
cover it.
Well, and also, and we touched on this during our presentation, it's not just, for me, it's not just about the last year, it's about looking at the, 10-year thing. They're up 400% over the last chunk of years. And the question was, okay, we get that you're ramping up stuff that you felt was, but when does it end? Where is the end to this?
Well, it ends
If
with
every
the
year,
bill. It ends with the bill.
Well,
yeah,
we definitely
well,
need-
that's a whole other ball of wax there,
That's part
but,
of the, I think, discussion is once you've built out a budget and programming and things to justify building, then how do you not the building? So that's my
Yeah,
concern.
Yeah, I kind of want to push back it to my people, the old people like me.
no, and
So,
to be honest, it was a slightly contentious meeting with the director.
I just didn't know if we had any role, if we could do anything about it.
Dan, do you know?
I don't know the way the mechanism, way that works. If the other 2 towns vote for it, we have to go along. I'm not certain, and I guess I don't know the status of where they are in their
Is
approval of that.
Well, I
think both
thought
South County
they,
Senior and South County EMT, it's a little bit like we're at Frontier, that's the deal.
Yeah. Yeah,
Becky, could you maybe
Yeah,
research
could
that
get
for
some-
us for
Well,
a future meeting?
yeah,
to find
but
out?
I'm pretty sure that she asked, your board for approval.
Oh, and
Correct.
yeah, our board did.
No,
The Board of Oversight.
the Board of
Yep.
Oversight.
Yeah, we did, and we
you
did.
approved,
I
so
did, yes.
the board that oversees them has approved the budget.
So now we have to approve it.
So they're government.
Well, no, we don't.
No, that's not necessarily true.
So, when the Board of, so same thing, I'm on the Board of Oversight for South County EMS.
I'm just trying to figure out how it works.
Yeah.
We're making a recommendation that this is the budget we want you to
Their
take.
budget, Right.
Yeah.
Now, the towns still need to accept it.
Right.
The towns still need to accept it. The Board of Oversight doesn't get that final
If
say.
the other two towns do, then
Then we're not clear exactly
what
what
happens?
happens then.
But, again, Whately doesn't have their town meeting until, like, June.
They moved it up.
Oh, did they?
It's April 29th today.
Oh, wow.
Starts on the
Everybody.
26th.
Yeah, I didn't know that, because theirs is usually really late. So then maybe Whately does have some. Because usually Whately, everybody else has approved it, and then Whately's kind of so far afterwards that I did not know that. That's actually great that they're much more in a line and.
Yeah. So was there any negative feedback from other towns that you know of?
Well, not from the oversight committee, no. I didn't get any bad.
And it seemed like Deerfield definitely was supporting the budget in the meetings I was at.
Again, I think it's worth having a conversation, maybe at the town administrator level or at the
Okay.
select board level,
Yeah.
about like,
I'll reach
is
out.
everybody happy with this, or are all of us grumpy about this, but just assuming that the other towns are going along with it? And if that's the case, can we have a conversation about pushing back a little bit? And again, not that like a reasonable increase isn't warranted, of course it is, but
Yeah, and South County EMS at early, or not super early, but at one point during the budget, he was really interested in presenting his budget once to all three towns together, which could be a nightmare, everybody,
But it could be an opportunity.
but it could be an opportunity to hear other towns' questions,
asking.
if South County EMS, if South County Senior Center presented once, and, you just found a place where you could get all the select board and finance committees together and hear everybody's questions, concerns. Like I said, it could go either way. It could be horrible or it could be great for us. I just don't know which way that would go.
Because again, that's a category that they brought the budget in lower this year, but could it have been even lower, right? Still, we don't know.
But the oversight committee, when you review the budget, you would have a chance to ask even more questions too? But that's
yeah.
the process is done?
Yeah,
but-
we ask questions
Yeah.
and, is this necessary or can we have a further explanation about this? Yeah.
Because it looks like if we nickel and dime a few things away, and then we add in our personnel committee recommendations, we're just back to too much. We're just back to where we started.
And the other big, if we get a 9% reduction done in time to the health insurance, it would free up about 52,000.
Well, that would be awesome. Work on it.
So
Still
maybe we
nowhere
can
near
get-
500,000, is it?
No,
Maybe
We just
closer to
need 10 more.
400 after all that. You'd be closer to 400 after all that.
yeah.
Because this updated one's 455, he said there's another 50, big mention today, but this other stuff's a wash.
But then there's also,
the new, yeah.
so the newest numbers before any of the cuts is 500 and 507.
He said this one was more up to date.
I said it hadn't, it was, but it,
Here, this one is the most recent one, if you want to pass that down to them. At the bottom of that one, it has the 507. And that does not include
Yeah, I've
the,
got the 507,
You do?
that's what I
Okay.
asked earlier.
Okay, gotcha.
More up to date.
sorry.
That's okay.
so, yeah, the 507, and that does not include the personnel numbers, which we're going to go over momentarily. So that's probably another 50 or so. But then, off of that, we already have about another 50 that we're looking at coming down, right, between the between George for the highway department and the.
Well, I already took George's.
You did, okay.
Unless we do.
Unless we do another-
Supposed to
another-
give up more.
Okay,
Well, we talked about an additional 20.
yeah,
potentially.
potentially from him, yeah. Yeah,
As far as local receipts, you explained earlier very well, you can't just flip back and forth and just set it where you want it, but, you know, this doesn't have the budget from here, or what was do we increase it some each year? Like, what was the local receipt
What I've
budget?
seen is been level.
It's been level for a number of years. Okay. So without abandoning the conservative approach, maybe there is some ability to move it some, or
Yeah.
we don't know.
We went up almost 40, right? Actuals.
But
I'm
you're
looking at-
talking
I'm
about the
asking
estimate.
FY '25 budget to FY '26 budget.
So if we went up 10%, would they be okay with that, is basically your question.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
is there some path that's not level set that still maintains conservatism? Because I
I
agree we
think
should
there-
do that.
You could
But
track,
it's-
you could track the
But it'll
increase in
reduce our
actuals.
free cash.
yeah. And again, it's,
That's a
yes.
good idea, actually.
So what did you say, Dan? I missed that.
Just track the actuals and bump it up by that much.
Actually,
One way to go.
24 to 25 by
40 grand.
20,000 or 40,000, then maybe,
Yeah.
you know, to maintain the same cushion, basically.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that approach. And again, the only flip side to that is anything we do on that end is gonna end up hurting us the following year on free cash. Which, again, not a bad thing necessarily if we wanna, you know, try to pad this particular year. I just always hate doing something that's gonna help this year but hurt next year. Because if somebody did that last year, I'm dealing with it right now, and so I try to avoid where possible.
Yeah.
All right, so, if everyone's, we have some more items in the thing, which are all kind of a big part of this, but I'm gonna, if everyone's good with that part of it, we're gonna move on to the next part. And that's gonna be,
That's one
Yeah.
general question before we move on. Sorry.
Please. No.
So this number is gonna bounce around, we're gonna make some more things are gonna move around. Let's say it gets, you know, it's at 500 now, let's say it gets somewhere between 400 and 500. Let's say maybe you make up some of it. What is the goal here? How much free cash are we looking to use? At what threshold do we say we can't bridge the gap and there will be an override? Like, how do
So-
you, and I know it's early, but like, how do
Yeah.
you think about that?
so, override's always the last step. Is always the, like, we try to avoid it as much as possible, for a number of reasons. The number one is that our number one job here is to be fiscally responsible for the people in town, and the whole idea behind Prop 2.5 is to force the towns to be as fiscally responsible as possible. I don't necessarily agree with the number they chose. 2.5 is not necessarily realistic.
Well, it doesn't make sense when there's a big inflationary year and
We could have a long discussion about why I don't think necessarily it's the best way of doing it, but that is our responsibility, is to find, is that we should be able to find a way to make that work in 2.5.
Okay.
Again, we could discuss whether that's reasonable or not, but that's what our job is to do. So the overrides always sort of the last thing. The other main reason I try to avoid overrides is that I hate uncertainty in my budget, and you don't know whether the override's gonna pass until it goes to town, and if it doesn't pass, we're back to well, what do you do? You know, then we're having to make cuts, but then we're making cuts with less time and with less, you know, with less control and whatnot. So I would like to avoid that. That being said, I mean, I've only done this is my third year, but the last 2 years, we had a similar, although slightly less large, gap at the beginning. And through this process, we find 20,000 here, we found 50,000 there, we go back to this department, whittle, and we get into a number where we say, okay, there's 300,000 left, or there's $250,000 left. We can take 150 from free cash, maybe we move some from stabilization accounts, something like that. One of the other mechanisms we haven't mentioned, which is sort of in the same vein of an override, is also a debt exclusion. Is that if, for example, the roof, if we end up cheating the capital stabilization fund in this year, we may end up finding ourselves 3 or 4 years having to go for a debt exclusion override. Still override, but a whole different kind of override at that point. So hopefully over the next couple of weeks, we can find a way to do this without an override. And remind me when we would need to know that we need an override by.
By the end of the month?
Yeah.
Oh, do we need to know by then?
well, we make the vote to have an override at the town meeting, right?
But we have to, but it would be an article on the town
A
meeting
warrant
warrant,
article,
so we have to have a certain amount of
warrant.
lead time to have that on there.
What are the warrant deadline?
I don't remember exactly when it is
The
though.
warrant, It's, I think it's 2 weeks at the maximum ahead of town meeting.
Okay.
I think the warrant deadline, I think, is coming up right now for, if the public wanted to,
Yeah.
But for 2.5, it could be 2 weeks?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so goal at this point is still to try to find a way to get small enough to bridge it with free cash and other stabilization funds. If those efforts don't succeed, then,
Then,
then
or we, rather than talking about going from expanded to level, we talk about going from level to some level of reduction, which is always a hard conversation and is certainly never the first place we want to go. But it's our job to figure that out, so.
thank you for my additional.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. I'm glad you asked the clarifying questions. And to be clear, I don't have all the answers either, so I will do my best. All right, we're gonna move into the Personnel Board recommendation for the COLA, which I believe I have in front of me.
Yeah, so I can do this if you want.
Yes, please, thank you.
So, what the Personnel Board is recommending is a 2.5% COLA, step adjustment for everyone.
and I just want to point out, that's the column about 5 to the right, hourly COLA only.
Yeah, so that's actually what we have typically called steps.
Yeah, that's supposed to be called step.
Yeah, the hourly COLA is probably a term no one's familiar with at this point because we've called them steps for so long. And then we're asking for a market adjustment for 3 employees that, basically $1 an hour, right, for these 3 employees. These are 3 employees that are, when we look at averages, average pay, they've thrown out the high, they've thrown out the low, we've looked at the averages. They're like $3 or more an hour behind other people in town, or not other people in town, other,
The average in Franklin County.
the average in Franklin County in this area. And 2 of these positions are our highway laborers, the other one's our treasurer collector. If you can go drive 10 more minutes to get to work every day for $3 to $5 an hour more, that's not, that's not far-fetched that we could be losing employees just due to their position being quite a bit under.
And not just losing good employees, but then turning around and trying to find other people to
Trying
replace
to
them at
find
these rates. You're not gonna
employees,
find somebody to start at that rate.
And then to start, training them and everything else, it's a loss. So we can't close that whole gap of $3 an hour overnight, but we would like to, our recommendation would be to start, $1 an hour on those positions. And so the dollar amounts on it, the COLA, 2.5% COLA would be a $16,180 expense. The step adjustment, the steps are $12,650, and then the $1 an hour wage adjustment for the 3 employees is an additional $5,928, giving the expense of employee wages an increase of $34,479. So that's kind of where that stands.
There's a number of positions that are not on here or not addressed by the Personnel Board. Some that just have steps, not steps, some that are just stipends, like the Select Board, the moderator, all of those positions. And I've been hearing, I know Nathaniel's been bringing up that those positions never get any increase, so I thought they might be what they were 10 years ago, but when I look back, I found that actually they were reduced $1,000.
Yes.
So they've gone backwards, not forwards. Because, and I understand, the select board sometimes, you know, if you're trying to balance a budget, you take money from this, you know, that place. But, so I'd like to get an understanding from the board if you would like increases on the stipends, like, if the dog officer were active, I think he has a stipend. I know it's the moderator, the select board, we've got the planning board, we've got,
Assessors, Board of Health.
well, assessors, board of health, and then we have the fire chief and the fire department haven't been getting any increases either. And the fire chief was looking for, at least, you know, he's looking for a couple dollars per officer, but I'm gonna talk to him about trying to do that in the coming year and maybe just establish the 2.5% increase this year. I'm not sure, I'll have to talk with him.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, you know, at the minimum, the firefighters should be getting COLA from my perspective. Like,
Yeah,
I think
at
that's a grievous oversight that we haven't been giving them that step, and especially because I understand what they get paid, and it's not much. So giving them those steps should be a minimum.
Well, I think now they're getting paid $18 an hour.
Yeah.
But it's not for all their time. I think it's for the training, no, it must be for all their time.
The fire department budget included a raise.
It did. He came in and asked for it. It was just
When I put
in
that
the.
number in, I'm just telling you
Okay.
that those numbers have not traditionally been in there, and that's
Yeah.
why, before putting it in, I'm gonna make sure it's supported.
The real question is, do we want to roll these positions that aren't covered by the town's normal COLA into the pool of positions that are just sort of automatically covered by that COLA when it is applied? And it'll go up and down depending on what the recommendation from the personnel committee is.
So I don't think that would even have any, I'm just trying to think, I don't think it would have anything to do with personnel committee. I think it would have to be outside of personnel committee that we would recommend increasing those, because they're elected positions and personnel committee does not deal with elected positions.
So that's all select board then.
So,
Fire department is elected officers?
no, I'm
The board.
talking the Board of Health,
Oh,
assessors,
yeah,
all that.
right.
So it would be a separate recommendation by the select board to increase or, you know, to do COLAs based on what personnel committee.
Yeah. I meant just that we would put in place a policy that would say whatever they recommend is what we automatically calculate into our ask for the following year for the boards.
Would that have to go to the town at least for the select boards, only because it'd be for yourselves? And I think this is a good idea.
So we wouldn't, so in the past, we wouldn't recommend it. It would just be an article item on there.
Right.
Well, we could vote, and so the town would see ours, but they would be like, they
Yeah.
didn't have a
And
position on
I
it.
mean, we could decide that we want to put in our budget $100,000 for each of us, and then the town would look at it and be like, what the heck are you doing? No, and they would vote against us, and it would be voted down. So yes, the town at town meeting, each part of the budget is, you know, is brought up and is available to be
But I
voted
mean,
on.
if you're making a shift to add a number of different elected, or maybe also unelected positions to the COLA calculation, does that itself have to go to town?
I don't believe so.
No.
They're elected and appointed, right? Like, so it's not all elected, it's
What's
elected
up?
and appointed.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, no, who's appointed?
Like Board of Health.
They're all elected.
No,
They're
Board of
elected.
Health
They're
is
elected. Board, Planning Board.
They're elected.
Elected?
I think all the ones we're talking about with stipends are all elected
So the
ones.
finance committee doesn't get a stipend, so we're appointed.
That's true.
Neither does Concom.
Concom, no.
Yeah.
Two committees that do the most work.
Or
Historical,
the personnel committee,
Or the person.
ZBA, they get paid?
or the library trustees who are also elected.
So these,
Not everybody has stipends.
Right.
the overall COLA conversation, I mean, this makes a lot of sense, especially the market adjustment of all of them, that might be the most sensible. From a timing standpoint, does this have to be decided on now, or would it be helpful to see how more of this broader budget conversation comes together? Not that this is a huge amount of money, $35,000, but how do you know, from a timing
So-
standpoint?
In terms of the recommendations for the people currently covered under the committee, we kind of have to decide now.
Okay.
And not that like this is a rubber stamp, but largely there's a reason that these people spent a bunch of time negotiating and figuring out what it's. And so we could, and sometimes this happens. Sometimes I think in Deerfield a couple of years ago, the recommendation was 3%, and the town decided to go 2.5%. We don't have to necessarily take that recommendation and vote on it. We can decide on something else. But it makes it really hard to do the rest of the budget stuff if we don't know what that number is.
So we can't plug the wages in.
We can't plug the wages in. We can't start to really dive down to the numbers. So yes, we could say we're going to defer our vote on this until later, leaving open the possibility of voting on a 2% instead of a 2.5% or something like that. That being said, at least from my perspective, inflation's been so high over the last year that I think 2.5% is very reasonable, and I would not argue against that per se.
We also have the option of voting, yes, we want the 2.5%, but we don't want the step in the market adjustment, or yes, we want 2 out of 3 or whatever, like, right? We can.
Yes, so we could,
You will.
or we could just say half of all this, or whatever. We can do that kind of stuff. Again, in general, what comes out of the personnel committee is not unreasonable, and
I'm not, just full disclosure, I'm on the personnel committee, I'm the
Yes.
finance committee representative.
yeah. But yeah, so yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess we don't have to vote on it today per se, but
No, but I do think we should plug those numbers
I would like
into
to
the
move it.
budget.
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. And if
And,
you have to change or lower them, then we adjust it.
yeah, and,
Um,
Like, in a way, I would argue that this is more part of our level service budget. This is what keeps the employees kind of,
well, yeah, it's level services. We're not,
Right.
we're not asking to increase anybody's hours. We're not asking to give anybody,
well, there's 3 kind of, we decided we paid you so low, we're gonna pay you a little bit more.
Yeah.
right, but that's still level services.
Yeah.
That service isn't changed. We're not increasing the number of hours they work. We're not giving them additional vacation time. We're not saying that, they're eligible for, some,
Free lunch.
yeah, anything. It's level services, and we're just trying to,
I made the mistake between level services and level funding so many times my first year because I kept saying level funding and like, is that what you're trying to say? Because level funding is a world difference. Level funding means cuts. Level funding does not mean the same thing you had last year.
Right.
And so yeah, level services. Anyways,
And I just wanted to mention, it's about 15,000 for the people on items that already are under contract that have to get paid but aren't part of the personnel board. It's about another 15,000.
but those are things that we've already calculated and accounted for because we already knew what those were. Those are already contractually.
But that's just the 2,
But I
that's the 2.5%.
haven't added them in here
You
yet.
haven't, okay.
So that's, so
So
we're
that's for
at,
the elected and appointed, elected people.
That's for people who
That's
have
for-
contracts already, like Becky and the chief of police, and people who have contractual increases that
that's
are
the-
already happening, but
Oh,
are
that's the
outside of the.
contractual and.
It's
I'm
built in,
including-
yeah.
Yeah, the fire,
So the
think the
contractual stuff
fire's
is already
already
in
in.
here.
No.
But the elected people aren't in here.
The contractual.
not all the contractual is in there because we haven't finished the negotiations with the chief.
But it's in here for everybody but the police chief.
no, so,
Or
It's not in mine.
no, so
It's
like,
not yours.
so you take Becky. Becky's agreement when she was hired, what was Becky negotiated, was she would take the same COLA as everybody else. Becky didn't come out and say, I want 8% every year for the next 3 years of my contract. She agreed to
Take whatever else.
the same COLA as everyone else. The town clerk is another one who,
Also said, I just want the same as everybody.
I'll take the same COLA as everybody else instead of negotiating her own pay. So, in order to know what Becky's increase is, the town clerk, some of those, we do have to sooner rather than later decide which of these,
About the-
especially the COLA, so we could start getting those in.
So it makes the most sense to use these numbers for our planning, but leave us the option if we get to a point where we have to make hard decisions to decide to make a change like that, yeah. Okay. Any other questions on the recommendation or the COLAs? Alrighty. We already kind of started doing this, review for your 26 budget request lists of changes.
Wait, do we have to vote? Do you guys have to vote?
On the COLA.
On the COLA? Not right now, I don't think so.
No, because it's just, you put it into the budget.
We use those numbers, if we vote, we've accepted that COLA, and that's what it is, and we don't have the option of
So we're
adjusting it
just-
down the line.
That's our working COLA.
Yeah, that's our working COLA,
So
we're
it's gonna
using
get
it.
built into this as we go forward?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's gonna
so
get
that-
built into the budget.
Okay.
Yeah, and then, because then when we're sitting down, trying to figure out where to find the extra $60,000 we need to make it work, we still have that on the table
Right,
along
so
with
if we
others.
came up exactly $12,650 short,
We're gonna lose the steps.
we could say, let's take the steps away and we balance our budget and life's great.
Well,
Um,
not great, but.
Well, yeah, it would have some disgruntled employees, but again, we need to at least plug those numbers
But at
into,
least that preserves the 1 hour for the, I mean, $1 for the highway.
And 2.5 for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, the COLA, yep.
So yeah, there's gonna be some hard conversations over the next couple of weeks, and we're leaving that as one of the ones that we can still have for now. Alright, so the review the 4-year 26 budget request list of changes, we've kind of already started doing that. I don't think there's anything we need to really dive into specifically in that. And then the last item here is discuss ways to balance the budget, which again, we've already been kind of doing. So the new business is more of a list of what we've been doing than an actual agenda today, because we're kind of bouncing all over the place, but in a healthy conversation kind of way. That being said, is everybody at this point, Finance Committee and Select Board, comfortable with our discussion we've had today? Is there anything we haven't talked about that you want to bring up? Or are we at a place where all of us need to spend some time chugging over numbers and thinking, and then 2 weeks from now, we'll have some more ideas?
Yeah, I think going through some of the numbers, I mean, this is super helpful, this brought a lot of things together, and now we can, like you say, dive into certain areas and see what kind of things we can come up with, and what's our gap way of life.
Great. Anything else from the Select Board on budget stuff for today?
No.
All right, before all of our brains melt,
I was gonna
because
say, I'm pretty,
I think we've all talked as much as our brains are gonna allow us today on that.
So, we don't have another scheduled select board finance committee now, so is this the point where the finance committee goes off and does their stuff, or we come back together? What's the,
If we can, I just didn't know if you wanted to schedule one in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I would like to, at the very least, 1 or possibly 2 or 3
Okay.
more sessions
I'll
of
just keep
joint.
rolling them out.
So yeah, so if
So Monday, March
24th, I believe it is,
Yes.
24th
yeah,
is the next joint.
that would be joint. So the 17th, which is next week, is gonna be just us, and then we'll do a joint one on the 24th.
And Becky or others, working backwards from town meeting, like when are the deadlines, like when, is my first cycle, your second, your third, how do we block and tackle this calendar between now and town meeting and stuff?
I think the 24th is a big, important meeting. I mean, we want to resolve as much on the 24th as possible.
Okay.
And then clean up in the early part of the first week of April, because we've got to get the information out. I mean,
Because you said 2 weeks prior to
The warrant
town
articles have
meeting.
to be 2 weeks before town meeting.
So
and that's the 24th?
So the 10th.
The 10th would be April.
26th. Town meeting.
26th.
26th, yeah, so April 12th would be our deadline to get them out there.
Saturday, so 11th for the function, Friday.
Yeah.
Day before.
10th, because you won't be closed on Friday, right? Yeah, so the 10th,
I've been coming in.
yeah.
Okay.
The seniors are last time.
So we will do our best to have all of our last round of questions available on 24th, and hopefully everyone will come with some ideas of how we're gonna balance this budget.
And
All right.
if you have any ideas during this time period and you want to bounce them off me, please call, text, whatever.
So our goal is, in general, we'd like to see the level services budget reflected, where we can see how much it would go up, like level services, like, we may add it back if somehow a miracle happens, right? With the library, it's very easy to see the level services versus not the level services.
The police, is gonna be the one that we're gonna need the most information on, because it's hard to tell with
But like the police, we don't know, you know, whatever, we really
Yeah.
kind of want to see that.
Yeah, and I got all the information from their current hourlies and everything, so I can
I
really
feel like almost,
dissect that.
I feel like the other places did that already, it's just that we just didn't have that, we just didn't have both for fire and solid one. He explained what it was, but
Yeah.
he didn't show us both.
Yeah, we had asked for both from everybody, and to my own chagrin, we got that back from about half of our town departments.
Yeah.
Which is a question going into future budget seasons, because we kind of need that information in order to have these conversations. But anyways, that aside, yes, it's gonna be important for us to know what that difference is for, especially for the police, but to a lesser degree, the other ones also. And just a reminder to both committees, open meeting law prevents you from talking amongst yourselves outside of the meeting, us amongst ourselves. But if you have a question for me, or you have a question for a member of the committee, as long as it's a member who's not in your committee, you are allowed to talk to them outside of these meetings if you
And
have
either one of
clarifying
us can
questions.
talk to Becky, but we can't talk to
And
you.
all of us can talk to Becky, and Becky does a great job, and part of her role is being that intermediary between people, so definitely leave her in on things.
The finance committee could call a meeting in between if we wanted to have a discussion.
Absolutely.
Yes, yep, you can call a meeting.
As many as you want, as long as you do it within the timeframes you need to, and you post it properly and all that stuff.
As long as it's posted and all those rules.
Yeah.
And we can talk about scheduling a meeting.
Oh,
That's not
yeah, we can
violating
talk
the law.
all day.
Schedule's easy, yep.
Yeah, it just can't be about something that's actually matters. All right, that's it for new business today. We're gonna try to go through old business real fast. Select board updates. I have nothing.
I have nothing.
Nothing.
Beautiful. Town minister updates, Becky.
We have nothing.
All right,
Perfect.
beautiful. Love to hear it. All right, correspondence. We have nothing. Public comment. Peter, do you have anything you wanted to?
Chris, anything you want to tell us?
I might give you a call tomorrow with some questions, Becky.
Okay,
But
I'm sorry, what's your name?
Chris Larrabee, I'm with the reporter. We've
Oh,
spoken on the phone a couple
yeah.
times.
Okay, I didn't know your face.
Yeah, sorry. I think it's the first time I've been to a meeting in person since you joined the town.
It has been a while since
It's
you've
been
done
a
this in
long
person.
time
for
since
sure.
you've been here.
Yep.
We missed you.
Yes, it has. Well, thankfully, yes. All right, I don't hear any other public comments, so that's it for public comment. Oh, no executive session tonight, but just an FYI that we will be having one next meeting, not the next joint meeting, but the next meeting of just ours. So that will be on next week's agenda. All right, before we adjourn, just a quick important dates to remember. Our next regular scheduled meeting is next Monday, the 17th. That will be just the select board. And then, as we just discussed, the following Monday, March 24th, will be the next joint meeting with the finance committee. At this time, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I motion we adjourn.
Second.
All right, we have a motion made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, 3-0 at 8:08.